All right, folks, here's what we're going to do today. Going over kind of what yesterday I had my first, real ride. I did a quick, riding impressions video before. Still haven't been able to really get on it and stuff. Just still putting on a little bit of break-in miles, and then getting the suspension set up by Tony up at GMD CompuTrack. So here's some things we discovered, give you a little more riding impressions, and also plan of the mods and stuff we're going to be doing for this bad boy. So let me see if I can find something to put my camera down on, and I'll sit here with the bike in the background and have a little chat with y'all. Let's see, how's this work? Hey, we got the bike there. All right, see how that works. So what we found in getting the suspension set up, couple things. A, we got it set up pretty good. What we're going to do is we're going to order up a set of Racetech cartridges. I'm not going to do it yet. I'll wait till get after Christmas, after the holidays. It's good enough for now. It's good enough. But to really dive this thing in, we found we had to take all of the compression and almost all the compression out, and then the rebound is in about a third out. But as far as compression goes, this fork out of the box was stupid stiff. And I know everyone thinks, oh, you got to have, really stiff suspension for track. Not that stiff. It was harsh on the road. When I sat there in the showroom floor pushing down on it, it was like, it wasn't a nice supple, moving. And you don't want to, you got to find that fine line between, you want it to be stiff enough to support you in the bike and not dive under braking and bottom out the fork and things like that. But you don't want it to be so soft or so hard that it just causes it to, like when you hit a bounce. The way Tony was explaining to me is, when you're going over bumps on the road or even on track, but especially on the road where there are more bumps and the whatchamacallit's not as good, the pavement. When you watch a racer going on track and hitting ripples in the pavement at some of the MotoGP tracks, you see the front tire doing this, but the bike is barely moving. And that's what you want to have. You want it to be supple and absorb bumps and to be able to cushion that so it doesn't push the bike up, which then pushes you up and transfer that into you. You want the bike to be relatively kind of gliding over it. The wheel could be doing this, but you want to find that where you get the support you need when you brake, when you accelerate. You don't want the rear end squatting and running wide and stuff like that. So you got to find that balancing act of making sure that it doesn't squat, doesn't dive. You're not in the turns on the side of the tire and hitting bumps and having the bike do this. You want it to move as a unit. And you basically want the bike to be relatively planted as it goes through, and the wheels just soaking up everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those forks off. We're going to put Racetech cartridges in there. The valves, the holes that the oil has to breathe, it's liquid, but has to travel through are like pinholes. So even when you took all the compression out, it was still more compression that we wanted. So the rebound was okay. The spring rate's actually okay as far as my weight. It really just has to do with compression. We want to lighten that up a little bit, and the only way to do that is, you can technically go thinner oil, although it's got 5 weight in it already, so that's not the right fix. The right fix is going to be getting a set of Racetech valving and a cartridge and throw that in there with those springs and 5 weight Racetech oil. That'll give us a bigger aperture for that fluid to flow through, and then we can put compression back in and find that balancing act. The problem here is, in backing it out all the way, it needs like another 5 clicks to get it where we want. We're close. We're 75% of the way there, but in order to get it, you can't get it anymore. It's open all the way. So we got to go to a different valve and shim stack and stuff. So that'll be the more expensive part, but I don't think cartridges are more than a couple $100. I'll probably spend more for labor. I don't think it'll be that expensive. We'll find out when I get an estimate from those guys. On the shock's actually pretty good. The spring weight is a little light for my weight, so when we do that, we're just going to pop the shock off and go up a weight or 2 on the spring. But the valving in the shock is actually good. We were able to get that dialed in really nice. We did have to put in 5.5 turns on top of the 6 turns that were already in it from the factory, so we're 11.5 turns in on the preload. And then we had to turn up rebound to compress to hold that spring back so it wouldn't, when you hit a bump, it wouldn't launch me out of the seat. But this does go along with what I read that Dave Moss had said on the 2021s, was that, you know, you almost have to just take all the preload, take all the compression and rebound out. And we found that out that pretty much bore true. We didn't take out all the rebound, but we did take out all the compression. So I don't know, maybe that time the spring and that and everything together might be $500-600. I don't know. It's not that much money to fix it. The rest of the stuff that's in there is actually very good. We just need more adjustability. Riding it yesterday, I haven't gotten, you know, we were riding on roads I'm not that familiar with, so I wasn't willing to push it. And we had a lot of traffic. If you saw most of my video from yesterday wasn't even usable because we were just sitting behind trucks. I keep hearing about truck shortages, but there were no truck shortages in North Georgia, no truck driver shortages. Everywhere we went at like 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, out in the middle of nowhere, was just traffic. We just sat in traffic all over the place. We did get a couple good areas where we could kind of get on it a little bit, and it's fast. It's real fast. The power is about on par with where my Tuono V4 was after I had flashed the ECU and had used the Bren tuner box to tune it, and a pipe and decat and all that stuff. And an airbox mod and filter and everything. This is on par with where that was, and that is fast. Our next mod, well, the one I'm going to do tomorrow is I've got a 15 tooth countershaft sprocket. We're going down 1 tooth in the front. The reason for that is as I'm riding this thing, you have to slip the clutch a lot from a start and kind of, you know, rev it up a little bit more than you think. You're like, this is a 200 horsepower at the crank motor. Why do you have to do that? The first gearing on this is stupid tall. It's like 90 something miles an hour in first. It's geared, if you could hit red line in sixth, you're doing 200 miles an hour according to the gearing charts. Whether you can actually hit that is another, we've covered that in some other videos, but it's geared to go faster than it's electronically limited to. So between those two factors, it almost feels like it struggles getting off the line. Now maybe that's good for wheelies and keeping it a little more controllable. But when you're in a parking lot, you're trying to do a maneuver or turn into a parking spot at 20 miles an hour, you're like lugging the motor. You're having to feather the clutch a lot. And I had that same problem on my Street Fighter 1098 and my Ducati 1198. And going to a smaller countershaft sprocket so that you have that little bit of extra torque down low, but it also lets you at the same speed, you'll carry a higher RPM, which means the motor's not going to be straining and struggling as much. It almost feels like if you start from a dead stop on a 600 in second gear. It's like that, what's wrong? You forgot to downshift at a light from second to first. It'll do it, but you're like, well, I'm having to rev it up a little bit more and feather the clutch a little longer. That's what it feels like with stock gearing. So I'm going to gear it down just 1 tooth in the front, which will also allow me to move the rear wheel back about 1 centimeter or so, increase the wheel length. It's like lengthening your swing arm just a little bit, which will help as much as it can help on a bike like this. A wee bit, just a little bit with the wheelies and stuff. So I'm going to gain extra acceleration, and then I'm, having that little longer wheelbase might help keep the front end and the electronics from having to work overtime. It's only like a 6% reduction in gearing. It's not massive. It lowered the top speed on Gearing Commander from 200 to 188, which is where it's electronically limited at 186 anyway. So my theoretical top speed limited by gearing is going to be matched to what the ECU is going to allow me to do anyway. And I'm never going to see those speeds. Even on track, I might hit, 150s, maybe low 160s. Unless you're just being an idiot on the highway and want to go to jail, I'm never going to do 180 plus anyway. So I like reducing the gearing just a little bit. Unlike the 1198. The 1198, I was able to do that, but I had no electronics. There was no ABS, no rider control, no modes, no traction. So you had to really be on it with that. And that had 92 foot-pounds of torque at the wheel with no traction control. And I was able to modulate it and handle it on that. Going down that little bit on this, even though this motor is making a little bit more power than the 1198 was, with all the electronic rider aids, I keep those turned on. I'm not Rossi. I'm not turning that stuff off because I think I know better than engineers. I'm going to leave that safety net on, and that'll kind of help keep me out of trouble as long as I'm not too much of an idiot. No promises. And then after that, I've got the link pipe on order, which is going to get rid of that whole box. I really love what Yamaha did in putting all 4 catalytic converters and the exhaust valve and the muffler all in that box. There's 2 little panels I got to remove, and then I will be able to just take that thing down with 3 bolts, pull it off, put in my Y pipe, and that's going to be a whole new game as far as flow, noise. And at that point, Chris Moore is going to do my ECU flash up at Moore Mafia in Greenville, South Carolina. We're going to throw it on the dyno, and we're going to throw his ECU flash into it, and then just do a quick dyno run to make sure it doesn't need any tweaking. But based on what he's been getting out of other R1s that are basically stock, just doing a Y pipe, he's going from 165, 166-ish at the wheel up to 180, 181. If you do the air filter, you're up at 184, 185. A big peak increase, depending if you do I'll do the sprint filter too before I do it, so it's all done at once. But we're looking at an 18 to 20 horsepower increase in peak power. That's a lot. What that's also going to do is between 12 and 14,000, where if you're looking at a chart and normally it goes peak, and I could feel this yesterday while I was riding it, it'd pull like a madman to 12,000, and it'd keep pulling past that, but you felt it go whirr, and kind of come off there. Now you're still making 155 horsepower up there, so it's no slouch, but you could tell it was less frantic and there was less urgency once you passed 12,000 RPM. The ECU flash gets rid of those restrictions, so it's going to go and keep going. So at 12,000, it may only pick up 18 to 20. But out at 13.5, 14,000, right about the time you're about to hit redline, you're talking about a 30 horsepower difference. It's big. So maybe 35 with the air filter. So yeah, because you're going to go from like 155 to roughly 185. All that's taken with a grain of salt. Depends from bike to bike and dyno to dyno. But as a percentage of increase, you're looking at a massive increase up there. That is going to be a game changer. That is where it's going to walk away from my old Tuono. Right now, I don't know that it's any faster. It's more aerodynamic. It doesn't make as much torque as the Tuono because that's a V4 and it's an 1100. But it's every bit as fast as the Tuono, and top speed probably a little quicker because of the better aero package. But I will tell you, riding this thing, the wheelie control, a lot less abrupt. You know, I was whacking the throttle at first and playing with it. I turned the traction control up to 5, traction control on 4, slide control on 2, wheelie control on 2, and power mode 2, which is still full power, but it takes a little bit of that edge off and makes it a little less abrupt. And you'd feel the front end come up and it'd go slightly down and it would kind of hover and do this. The Aprilia would come like, whoa, and it would slam it down and it would come back up again and you were like bouncing down the road. This was nice. The steering damper worked well when I was passing somebody. The tire was skimming off the ground and there was some big reflectors on the double yellow there. And it was hitting, the front wheel was skipping over the top of those and making the wheel, but it wasn't a tank slapper. It really did kind of control it. I felt it going on, but it was nice. Traction control would kick in a few times if I got on the gas a little too hard. I'd see the light flicker, but I didn't feel it. It didn't feel really intrusive. Everything was very smooth. It's an interesting motor because it has some of the smoothness and the reviness and that zip. It just wants to scream like an inline 4, but it's got a little bit more of that brutish thumpiness to it that you see in V-twins or V4s. It's a really interesting motor. I'm really glad I got this because it's got a lot of character. I've said before, I'm a bit of a bike snob. I like Ducatis and Triumphs and Aprilia and the Italian bikes especially. Just something about them. I never claimed they were faster or better. I mean, they'd probably say, well, the Japanese bike is probably better made or more reliable or you get more miles out of it. And that's probably a true statement in most cases. But it's, they don't always have a lot of character. And this does. I mean, it looks Japanesey. The looks, I'm kind of, the looks are nice, but to me, it's not any better looking than the CBR or the ZX-10. It's not as good looking as the Panigale or the RSV, in my opinion. But it has character. It's the one Japanese bike that's really got character. That motor is soulful. It sounds angry, even though it's muted and corked up with that stupid exhaust monstrosity under there. But it's got something. It has that intangible. It's got that feel. It's got that sound to it. There's something about the delivery of that cross-plane motor that really is impressive. And once that thing gets opened up on the exhaust and gets that tune and picks up more power, this thing's going to be just gnarly. I mean, really gnarly. So I don't know what speeds we hit yesterday. I was doing some pulls with my buddy Dean, Ant-Man Moto. Check out his channel. And we had some fun, and we didn't really get into it. I'm hoping if I can get a day where it's warm enough to where I feel like I've got some decent heat in the tires, I can get up on one of my normal roads like Richard Russell Parkway, and I can really dive into it and see what it does. But the ease with which this thing gathers speed is just, it's on a whole nother level. 600, 750s are quick. And maybe it's just because I haven't been on a leader bike in a while, but the last time I had a leader bike really was, as far as a full fairing, I had a CBR 1000 RR, but that was in '07. I was making 154 at the wheel. My 1198 was making 162 at the wheel. What made that maniacal was the lack of any rider aids whatsoever, and that torque. 92 foot-pounds of torque at the wheel is a lot. You know, my Tuono was getting up there. The Tuono is probably the closest bike I've had when it comes to just sheer ferocity is this. But that was also a V4 and an 1100, had a 100cc advantage. So I gotta say I'm impressed. The quick shifter, the auto blip, everything works. Everything feels good. The upshifts are really smooth and quick. The upshifts on my ZX6R were mushy. I hated the quick shifter. It was nice to have it, but nowhere near as refined as my Panigale or the Street Triple RS that's sitting behind me. Much nicer unit. This is on par with the Triumph, which is probably one of the best units I've ever used. It takes a little bit more force on downshift, but that's okay. There's been a couple times if you have such a light shifter action, your foot accidentally hits it and it cuts spark when you didn't mean to. You weren't actually pushing it. Your foot just kind of hit the lever. So on downshifts, I'm fine with it actually having a little bit of it takes a little more pressure, but it works very well. Upshifts, buttery smooth. I've got about 350 miles on it. Did the first oil change yesterday. Safety wired I've already got the filler plug safety wired. I safety wired the filter. I'm using the High Flow HF 204 RC. Which is a racing oil filter. It's the same one I use in both Triumphs, which is kind of cool. So I already had one of those on hand. And I'm using Maxima Pro Plus, ester-based full synthetic 10W40. That's what I'm using currently. And I got nothing bad to say about this bike. I really can't wait till I get that damn X pipe on there, or Y pipe, whatever. And I get this thing tuned. It's gonna sound amazing. And it's going to pick up all that power, which it doesn't need, but why not? If I could just throw the Y pipe on there and just have the sound and drop the 10 pounds, 12 pounds of weight, I'd almost be fine with that. I wouldn't bother going and getting it tuned and unrestricted. I mean, it doesn't need any more power. It really doesn't. But it will run like crap with the Y pipe because it's a Euro 5 compliant motor, so it's going to need the tune. So that'll cost me $265, I think, for the flash and tune, and for him to take it out and do it and clear the codes and everything. So very affordable. With that and the Y pipe, you're talking under $500 easily. Well under $500. The Y pipe was $110 shipped. So that and the tune, you're looking at $400 and change, and it's going to transform the bike, make it smoother, and you're going to pick up a ton of power while making it sound just glorious. So that's where we're at. I'm going to oil up my chain because I did just pressure wash and clean the bike today. I consider this fully broken in. I've discussed this before. On new modern motors, you don't have to do a 600 or 1,000 mile break-in. There's enough evidence that actually a harder break-in, not abusing it, but a harder break-in actually might get the rings to seat sooner and earlier and better. Yeah, when I drained out the oil, it was 350 miles on it, and yesterday I was getting on it a little bit. I wasn't able to ride it in the turns as hard as I wanted for the reasons I mentioned earlier, but I've been revving it. I've been hitting up toward 12,000, 13,000 RPMs and stuff, but that oil came out still fairly clean. Not a lot of contamination. I just like to get the break-in oil out first. At this point, it's got 350 miles on it. I'm going to pronounce it broken in, and I'm going to ride it like I stole it, the way a Japanese bike of this caliber wants to be ridden. And it's going to be awesome. Can't wait to get it tuned and get it out on track and see what it can do. So anyway, enough rambling. That's my updated initial impressions of this thing. It's just a crazy motor. Oh, and the other set of mods I got to do. I'm going to go to R&G at Revzilla for like $450. They've got an entire crash protection kit. So front axle sliders. I've already got ones on the back. but it'll give me the bullet style, really cool looking units that'll sit here for frame sliders, and then engine case both on this side on the stator cover, and then both on the other side. Get the heavy duty crash protection all the way around the bike for $450. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll document all this stuff. Probably be back tomorrow after I do the sprocket swap and go out for a quick ride. I'll throw the camera on it then. And for a camera mount, we're using a ram mount. Let's go up here. Ugh. So we got the ram mount here that just mounts into the steering stem, and then it's got the the clamp, the normal armature, and then I've got the thing that's got the GoPro mount on the end, so it'll sit right there, and I can get all my get the dash in view. It keeps it out of the wind, so you just hear more motor noise than wind noise. So it's a beautiful bike. Just washed it, just cleaned it, so now I need to go and wipe down and oil my chain, and then my lunch break's over and I need to get back to work. So hope you all enjoyed this. Hit like and subscribe, share with your friends, and leave some comments.